There was a season where serving people well was the differentiator in church, in business, everywhere. Meet needs, be accessible, be helpful. That was what we now know as the service economy. Providing good, helpful service was where everyone competed. Then the service economy in the late 80s through the 1990s gave way to the experience economy. And we leaned into that, churches included, right? We improved production. We elevated worship. We clarified communication. We designed, intentional Sundays. We added a hazer and some moving lights, right? And for a while, excellence really did separate you. But now, excellence just qualifies you. Think of it this way. A bad experience disqualifies you. A good one, it just gets you considered today. And you know what? That can be pretty exhausting. Like you're constantly improving something that never quite becomes enough. When I was working in student ministry, I've spent basically my entire adult life in ministry, but the first 10 years of my adult life after college, I was in the business community as a consultant, volunteering in student ministry, and then eventually becoming like an elder over middle school at a church. But all of those years in student ministry, I was very involved because I really, really enjoyed it. And I'll tell you what, it felt like every Sunday it was so exhausting because it felt like we were trying to one-up ourselves every week. And in a way, no matter how great of a program we created on a Sunday, it felt like we celebrated for maybe 30 seconds because then we had to start planning something even better. Listen, if you feel that way about your church, it is so easy to live kind of constantly exhausted or constantly irritated. But I want to kind of suggest something a little more hopeful today. Because while we are still living in the experience economy, and experiences still matter a lot, we have layered this economy. We've added 3 other layers. We've talked about the other ones already, but here's the 3rd layer, the transformation economy. And this one is different. In fact, this one we would say hits different for us in the church. Because, think about this, people are not resisting change anymore. They're actually chasing it. Here in this transformation layer, people aren't resisting getting better, they're desiring better. They want to change, they want to improve. Look at where people are spending money. If you go back 15, 20 years, hardly anyone was hiring a personal coach, a leadership coach, attending masterminds, online courses, fitness programs, therapy, structured growth environments, right? Now people want measurable progress. They want identity clarity. They want to become someone different, someone better. They want to be the best version of themselves. And the companies and the businesses and the churches that notice that realize this shift, are positioned to do so well right now. What I love about it, this is kind of a cultural shift, not a drift. And it's a cultural shift to formation. And people are hungry for it. They're actually wanting it. And this is where we as the church, have an extraordinary opportunity right now. For years, it felt like we had to convince people that spiritual growth mattered. As I said, I've been a professional Christian for 21 years now, right? I've been working in ministry specifically for 21 years as a job. 13 of those years, plus lead pastor of a church, Woodstock City Church. Listen, in the early days of my ministry, even if I go back to those volunteer days when I was still in the business community, working in student ministry, if we had an hour program, for instance, I felt like we spent 30 minutes of that hour trying to ease people in before we could tell them something true that could change their life. And even more recently, when I started working in the North Point model as a lead pastor of Woodstock City Church, for instance, think about preaching. I learned how to use this approach, and I still use it, by the way, is shifted a little, actually shifted a lot, but the formula is still the same. We want to create connection and tension before we give truth and application, and then we land the message. That's how people learn. But the amount of time we spend on connection and tension is very different today. If I go back 15, 20 years, I felt like in a 30, 40-minute message, we would spend, 20 minutes up front connecting to create common ground, sharing the tension around where we were going so that people were ready to hear something true. Today, people are walking into the church ready to hear something true because they want to be better. I mean, it's an amazing shift that's happened, and it's shifted in our favor. It feels like for the first time, maybe ever. Like culture has normalized the desire for transformation. That's great news for us. I mean, the average person, right, may not use theological language around this, but they are asking really deep in what we know. They're asking theological questions. I mean, people are actively wondering all the time, who am I becoming? Why do I feel stuck? What does a meaningful life really look like? How do I change? I mean, those are discipleship questions, which means this moment is not about out-competing the culture. It is about clarity within where culture already is. Listen, if transformation in Christ is what we offer, we need to make that pathway unmistakably clear today, not assumed, clear, because people want it. But if we make it hard for people to see it, if we make it hard for people to engage and take the journey, they're just going to go do it somewhere else, and probably not at a church. So here is a practical exercise I'd encourage you to do maybe this week with I'd love for you to gather your leaders to do this. Maybe it's your elders, your core key volunteers. If you have a bigger staff, get your executive team, just whatever kind of you would say is your leadership group. I think you need to gather some people together, and you need to get on a whiteboard. And I would love for you to draw the path. Now, again, this is going to be too simplistic. I know that spiritual growth isn't like easy step 1, step 2, and it's not always that clear. I get that, okay? But draw what you perceive the path being in your church from a person first visiting to becoming a mature disciple. Now, I know some people visit for the first time who are mature. I mean, I get it, okay? So don't try to poke holes in this. Just go with me for a minute. Let's assume that the person who visits is not a believer. If you followed along with my 5 rights, I talk about this constantly, okay? But the 5 rights is a system for helping you think through creating ministry. And it starts with the right person, right? You got to know who you're talking to. So let's assume that you're talking to someone who's a seeker. They're not a believer yet, but they're showing up because they're curious. They're cautious, but they're curious. And now they have visited. They have come to your church. We're going to start with that kind of person. What does your path look like for them? How do you help people? How do you inspire and equip people to take steps from not believing to believing, to maturing in their faith, to multiplying their faith in others? What is that path? It's the Great Commission, by the way. What does the Great Commission look like in your church? And listen, I don't want you to write down the ideal version. Write down the real version. What is the real thing, the real path in your church right now? And then I want you to ask some hard questions, right? 3 questions. Here's the first one. If someone commits here for 3 years, who are they becoming? Okay, and make it a year. I think 3 years is better. It gives you a little bit longer, 3 years of Jesus' ministry, a lot of threes, okay? So who are they becoming? 3 years. Can you articulate that? Can you describe that in plain language? Like, if you can't, then we got a clarity problem. Second, does every major ministry and program, everything you do in your church, does it intentionally move someone along that path? Or, and this is probably true, are there some things simply good? They're just good activities, but they don't really clearly connect to anything on the path. If you have some of those, I would highly encourage you to consider getting rid of them. And here's the last one, okay? Is it obvious to a brand new person? Think about that seeker, that curious but cautious person, not a believer, but they're leaning in because they've realized things aren't working, the way they've been doing it isn't working. So to a brand new person, what is their next step? What is their next step? Not, here are the 10 options, but what is the next best thing for them to do? You have to know that. And here's why. People are hungry for transformation. They are hungry for change. And it is our job to ensure that the path we create to change is clear, not blurry. It needs to be very clear. Listen, in all of my years kind of leading in the church, this season that we are in right now It is primed for what we do best. I mean, listen, the world is asking identity questions, and Jesus is the only person who answers them well. The world is asking, how do I change? The gospel answers that, right? The world is asking, where is meaning? Well, Jesus answers that. We don't need to manufacture hunger today. We just need to steward it. So instead of asking, how do we create a better experience? I'd love for you to ask, how do we clearly guide people into transformation? How do we clearly guide people to Jesus? That kind of shift, that question, it really does change everything. It changes how you preach, how you design ministries and models. It even changes how you evaluate success, your metrics. And it relieves a lot of pressure because you're no longer trying to compete at the experience level. You're now stewarding formation. You're stewarding what people are chasing. And you know what? That's the church's calling. If you lead with clarity in this moment, I genuinely believe this could be one of the best fruitful, maybe the most fruitful seasons of ministry you're ever going to experience. And it isn't because culture is easier. I mean, things get harder all the time. But culture is finally asking the questions that Jesus has the answer for. So start with that whiteboard, right? Get clarity so you're ready. Then align everything. That's how you're going to find momentum in a world that is looking for what you have to offer.